At 2:06 a.m., Victor Kane, the most feared name in the criminal underworld, receives a call that shatters his carefully constructed armor. His ex-girlfriend is dying in childbirth, and only his blood can save her. The same woman he threw out into a storm 6 months ago, calling her a liar when she said she was pregnant. Now, as thunder cracks over Mercy Ridge Hospital and the power grid fails, Victor must race against time, his own guilt, and a collapsing emergency room to save the two people who could either redeem him or destroy what's left of his soul. If you want to see how far this story of redemption and second chances travels, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. Now, let's dive into Victor's darkest night. The storm had teeth. Victor Kane stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his cliffside mansion, watching the Pacific Ocean throw itself against the rocks 300 feet below. Lightning split the sky in jagged white scars, illuminating the waves for a heartbeat before plunging everything back into darkness. Rain hammered the reinforced glass like bullets, a sound he'd grown accustomed to over the years. Violence disguised as nature. He swirled the scotch in his crystal tumbler, the amber liquid catching the dim glow of the fireplace behind him. Macallan, 25. $200 per glass. It tasted like ash tonight. Everything tasted like ash these days. The grandfather clock in the hallway struck twice, its chime swallowed by thunder. 2:06 a.m., the hour when ghosts came calling, when the walls of his empire felt more like a prison than a fortress. Victor took another sip, welcoming the burn. Physical pain was simpler than the other kind. His reflection stared back at him from the black glass. 6'3" of tailored menace wrapped in a charcoal suit that cost more than most people's cars. Dark hair swept back from a face that had been called handsome by women who didn't know better, and terrifying by men who did. At 38, Victor Kane had built an empire on fear, respect, and the kind of ruthlessness that made grown men check under their beds at night. But empires, he'd learned, were cold company. His phone vibrated on the marble side table, the sound barely audible over the storm. Victor ignored it. Calls at this hour were always business, and tonight he wanted nothing to do with the network of corruption, violence, and money laundering that formed the backbone of his organization. Tonight, he wanted to drink expensive scotch and pretend he was someone else. The phone vibrated again. Then again. Victor's jaw tightened. Whoever was calling had a death wish or information important enough to risk his wrath. He crossed the room in 3 strides, his Italian leather shoes silent on the Persian rug, and snatched up the phone. Unknown number. His first instinct was to hurl the device into the fireplace and watch it melt. Instead, some impulse he didn't understand made him answer. "You have 30 seconds to explain why you're still breathing." His voice was a low rasp, honed by decades of delivering threats he always kept. "Mr. Kane?" The voice on the other end was female, young, shaking slightly. "This is Sarah Chen. I'm a nurse at Mercy Ridge Hospital. I'm calling about Lila Wynn." The name hit him like a fist to the solar plexus. Lila. Victor's grip on the phone tightened until the case creaked. 6 months. 6 months since he'd seen her face, heard her voice, felt the warmth of her presence in his cold, carefully controlled world. 6 months since the night he'd destroyed everything. "I don't know anyone by that name." The lie came automatically, a reflex honed by years of denying connections, erasing trails, protecting himself. "Mr. Kane, please." The nurse's voice cracked with urgency. "She listed you as her emergency contact. She's in labor, and there are complications, serious complications." The scotch tumbler slipped from Victor's fingers, shattering on the hardwood floor. Amber liquid spread across the wood like blood, and he didn't even notice. "What kind of complications?" The words came out strangled, barely recognizable as his own voice. "She's hemorrhaging. We've tried everything, but her blood type is AB negative. It's rare, less than 1% of the population. Our supply is critically low because of the storm. Roads are flooded, the blood bank can't get through, and she's losing too much too fast." Victor's mind raced, each thought a bullet point of horror. Lila. In labor. Dying. "What do you need?" He was already moving toward the door, grabbing his keys from the entry table. "We ran her file through the National Donor Registry for compatible matches in the area. Your name came up, Mr. Kane. You're AB negative too. You might be the only chance she has. The room tilted. 6 months ago, Victor had stood in the doorway of this very mansion and watched Lila walk away into a storm just like this one. She'd been soaked to the bone, mascara running down her cheeks, one hand pressed to her stomach as she delivered the news that should have filled him with joy. "I'm pregnant, Victor. It's yours." And he, in his infinite wisdom and paranoia, had called her a liar. "You think I'm stupid?" He'd laughed, the sound cruel and sharp. "You think you can trap me with some fake pregnancy? How much did my enemies pay you, Lila? How much was I worth?" She'd stood there, rain plastering her dark hair to her skull, those enormous brown eyes pleading with him to see the truth. "Victor, please. I love you. I would never—" "Get out." He'd cut her off with 2 words, cold and final as a grave. "Get out of my house, and if you ever contact me again, I'll make sure you regret it." She'd left without another word, disappearing into the storm like a ghost. And Victor, satisfied that he'd protected himself from another gold digger, another trap, had poured himself a drink and tried to forget the way she'd looked at him. Not with anger, but with a heartbreak so profound it had made something in his chest crack. He'd told himself he'd done the right thing, cut the problem off before it could grow, eliminated a threat. But every night since, he'd seen her face in his dreams, heard her voice breaking on his name, felt the phantom weight of what he'd thrown away. Now she was dying, and the child, his child, a voice whispered in the back of his mind, was dying with her. "I'm on my way." Victor's voice was steel wrapped in ice. "Keep her alive. Whatever it takes, keep her alive until I get there." "Mr. Kane, the storm, I don't care if the sky is falling, I'll be there in 20 minutes. He ended the call and sprinted for the garage, his mind already calculating routes, probabilities, obstacles. The hospital was normally a 40-minute drive in good weather. Tonight, with the storm turning the coastal highway into a river and mudslides shutting down half the mountain roads, it might be impossible. Victor didn't believe in impossible. The garage housed a collection of vehicles that could fund a small country, Lamborghinis, Ferraris, a bulletproof Escalade for business meetings that might turn violent. Tonight, he grabbed the keys to the Range Rover, the only vehicle with the clearance and weight to handle flooded roads. Thunder cracked overhead as he peeled out of the driveway, the mansion's security gate swinging open automatically. Rain attacked the windshield with savage intensity, the wipers struggling to keep up. Victor pushed the accelerator down, the powerful engine growling as the SUV launched into the storm. The coastal highway was a nightmare of water and debris. Waves crashed over the guardrail, sending spray across the asphalt. Wind buffeted the Range Rover, trying to shove it toward the cliff edge. Victor held the wheel in a death grip, his knuckles white, his jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. Images flashed through his mind with every lightning strike. Lila laughing at one of his rare jokes, her whole face lighting up like sunrise. Lila curled against him on the couch, her small body fitting perfectly into the spaces his sharp edges left behind. Lila whispering that she loved him, her fingers tracing the scars on his chest, evidence of a violent life she'd never questioned, never condemned. Lila standing in the rain, heartbreak written in every line of her body as he'd sent her away. "I'm an idiot," Victor snarled to the empty vehicle. "A paranoid, broken, worthless." A tree branch the size of a telephone pole crashed onto the road 50 feet ahead. Victor yanked the wheel, sending the Range Rover into a controlled drift that brought it inches from the guardrail. Metal shrieked against metal, sparks flying, and then he was through, accelerating again. His phone rang. Sarah Chen's number. "Talk to me." Victor didn't take his eyes off the road. "Mr. Kane, where are you?" The nurse's voice was tight with barely controlled panic. 15 minutes out. What's her status?" "Not good. The bleeding is getting worse and the baby's heart rate is dropping. Dr. Reeves wants to do an emergency C-section, but without more blood on hand, she might not survive the procedure." Victor's foot pressed harder on the accelerator. The speedometer climbed past 80, past 90. Suicidal in these conditions. But suicide was preferable to arriving too late. "Tell Dr. Reeves to prep for the C-section. I'll be there, and they can take whatever they need from me." "Mr. Kane, you don't understand. The amount of blood she's losing, even with you as a donor, there's no guarantee. Then we make our own guarantees. Victor's voice could have cut diamond. Is Marcus Reeves still the head of surgery there? A pause. Yes, but tell him Victor Kane is coming, and I expect the best care money can buy. Tell him I'm funding a new surgical wing if this goes well, and burning the hospital to the ground if it doesn't. Make sure he understands I'm not speaking metaphorically. Mr. Kane, I don't think threats... They're not threats, Ms. Chen. They're promises. Now tell me everything I need to know about her condition. As the nurse ran through the medical details, placental abruption, severe hemorrhaging, fetal distress, Victor's mind shifted into the cold, calculating mode that had kept him alive through 2 decades of gang wars and power struggles. This was a problem. Problems had solutions. He just had to find the right combination of resources, pressure, and ruthlessness. The hospital appeared through the rain like a fortress of light, its windows glowing against the black sky. Victor barely slowed as he entered the parking lot, the Range Rover hydroplaning through 6 inches of standing water before he slammed it into a parking spot reserved for doctors. He was out of the vehicle before the engine stopped, running toward the emergency entrance. The automatic doors parted, and Victor Kane, crime lord, killer, architect of an empire built on blood and fear, entered Mercy Ridge Hospital looking like a drowned animal. Water poured off his expensive suit, his hair plastered to his skull, his gray eyes wild with an emotion he'd spent years learning to suppress. Terror. Pure, undiluted terror. A security guard moved to intercept him, taking in the wild appearance and probably assuming he was drunk or dangerous or both. The guard was a big man, ex-military by the look of him, with the kind of build that suggested he could handle trouble. Victor had crushed bigger men for lesser reasons. "Sir, you can't," the guard began. "Lila Wynn, where is she?" Victor's voice was a whip crack that made the guard actually step back. "Sir, if you don't calm down, I'll have to..." Victor's hand shot out, grabbing the guard's radio before he could call for backup. "Listen very carefully. My name is Victor Kane. The woman upstairs is dying along with my child. You can either tell me where she is right now, or you can try to stop me and spend the rest of your life regretting it. Choose." Something in Victor's eyes, some glimpse of the abyss that lived inside him, made the decision for the guard. "3rd floor, labor and delivery. But you'll need..." Victor was already moving, leaving the guard stammering behind him. He found the stairs and took them 3 at a time, his heart hammering against his ribs. Water dripped from his clothes, leaving a trail across the institutional linoleum. The 3rd floor hallway was chaos. Nurses rushed between rooms, their scrubs rumpled from long shifts. Machines beeped in discordant symphony. Somewhere, a woman screamed, the primal sound of bringing life into the world. The lights flickered, once, twice, and Victor's blood turned to ice. A young woman in blue scrubs spotted him, her eyes widening. "Mr. Kane? Sarah Chen?" She nodded, already moving toward him. "This way. We don't have much time." Sarah led him through a maze of corridors, her sneakers squeaking on the polished floor. Victor followed, his mind cataloging everything. Exit routes, security cameras, the locations of potential obstacles if things went sideways. Old habits died hard. They stopped outside a door marked Operating Room 3, Prep. Through the window, Victor could see a flurry of activity, doctors, nurses, machines. And there, on the table, small and pale, and so terribly fragile, was Lila. His heart stopped. She looked like a broken doll, her dark hair spread across the pillow, her skin the color of old parchment. An oxygen mask covered her nose and mouth, fogging with each shallow breath. IVs snaked into both arms, pumping fluids into her faster than her body could lose them. A fetal monitor showed an erratic heartbeat, too fast, too weak. Victor's hand pressed against the glass, his breath fogging the window. "How bad?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Bad." Sarah didn't sugarcoat it. "The placental abruption is severe. The baby is in distress. Every minute we wait increases the risk of losing them both, but Dr. Reeves won't operate without more blood on hand. Your arrival might just..." The lights flickered again, longer this time. 3 seconds of darkness before the backup generators kicked in with a mechanical groan. "The storm knocked out the main power grid," Sarah explained, her voice tight. We're running on generators, but they're old. And with the load from the equipment, how old? Victor's mind was already racing ahead, seeing problems, calculating solutions. 15 years. They're due for replacement next year, but budget cuts. I'm making a call. Victor pulled out his phone, scrolling through contacts until he found the one he needed. The call connected on the first ring. Kane. The voice on the other end was gravelly, suspicious. It's 2 a.m. Dimitri, I need a favor. Favors from you usually end with someone in the hospital. Funny you should mention that. I'm at Mercy Ridge right now. Their generators are failing and I need mobile power hospital grade capable of running a full surgical suite. How fast can you get it here? A pause. In this storm? Even if I had that kind of equipment, you do. You stole it from that medical supply convoy 6 months ago. I saw the inventory report. Dmitry Volkov, arms dealer and general merchant of anything illegal, sighed. You're going to owe me for this, Kane. Name your price. The West Side Territory. Full control, no interference. Victor didn't hesitate. Done. Get it here in 30 minutes, and I'll throw in the protection rackets too. 20 minutes. And Kane, whatever is going on, I hope it's worth giving away half your empire. The call ended. Victor turned back to Sarah, who was staring at him with wide eyes. What did you just do? She asked. Ensured we don't lose power mid-surgery. Now, what do you need from me? Sarah seemed to shake herself back to professional mode. Blood work, medical history, consent forms. Skip the forms. Take my blood. Run whatever tests you need and get me into that room. Mr. Kane, there are protocols. Miss Chen. Victor's voice dropped to the lethal quiet that made his enemies flee. The woman in that room is dying because I was a paranoid fool. That child she's carrying exists because I was too arrogant to believe she could love me without an ulterior motive. I threw her out into a storm and spent 6 months telling myself I'd dodged a bullet. Now she's on a table fighting for her life, and I will move heaven, earth, and every law in this hospital to save her. So you can either help me or get out of my way. Sarah held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded. Follow me. She led him to a small room where a lab tech was waiting with needles and vials. Victor shrugged out of his soaking jacket and rolled up his sleeve without being asked. The tech tied off his arm, found a vein, and inserted the needle with practiced efficiency. This will take 15 minutes to process, the tech said, drawing multiple vials of dark red blood. You have 10. Victor's tone left no room for argument. As the tech scurried away with the samples, Sarah handed Victor a set of scrubs. You'll need to change, and Dr. Reeves will want to speak with you before we proceed. Victor changed in the bathroom, the movements mechanical. The scrubs were too small, stretching across his broad shoulders, but they were clean and dry. He caught his reflection in the mirror. A stranger stared back, eyes haunted, jaw tight. When was the last time he'd been afraid? Truly, bone-deep afraid? He couldn't remember. Dr. Marcus Reeves was waiting when Victor emerged. The surgeon was in his 60s, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, with the kind of steady hands that came from decades in the OR. Victor recognized him immediately. They'd met 3 years ago when one of Victor's associates had needed emergency surgery after a deal went bad. Reeves had saved the man's life and never asked questions. Victor had donated $500,000 to the hospital's cardiac wing and never asked for favors. Until tonight. Mr. Kane, Reeves extended his hand and Victor shook it. I heard you were making generous offers regarding our surgical wing. I also mentioned burning the hospital down if things go poorly. I assume Ms. Chen relayed that part too? A ghost of a smile crossed Reeves's weathered face. She did. I prefer to focus on the positive incentives, personally. But I need you to understand the situation we're facing. Even with your blood, the odds aren't good. The abruption is severe, the baby is in distress, and Ms. Wynn has already lost a significant amount of blood. If we operate and complications arise, I may have to make difficult choices about who to save. Save them both. Victor's voice was iron. Mr. Kane, I don't care what it takes. I don't care about odds or statistics or medical precedent. You will save them both, or I will spend every dollar and every connection I have making sure you regret the day you met me. Reeves studied him for a long moment, and Victor saw the calculation in the surgeon's eyes. The doctor was weighing his options, measuring the threat against his ethical obligations, trying to determine if Victor was bluffing. He wasn't. "I'll do everything in my power," Reeves said finally, "but I need you to understand that everything might not be enough." "Then we'll make it enough." The lab tech rushed back in, slightly out of breath. "Blood work is clear. He's a match, AB negative, no infectious diseases, no contraindications for donation." "How much can you take?" Victor asked. The tech blinked. "Safely? 1 unit, maybe 2 if you're healthy. Any more, and take 3. I'll be fine." "Mr. Kane, that's not 3 units. Now." Sarah and the tech exchanged glances, but Sarah nodded. They set up the donation equipment, and Victor sat still as they inserted the needle. He watched his blood flow through the tubes, literally watching his life force drain away to save the woman he'd thrown away. Poetic justice, maybe. The room began to swim slightly as the second unit filled. Victor gripped the armrest, refusing to show weakness. The tech was watching him with concern, but Victor shook his head. "Keep going." "Mr. Kane, you're already showing signs of—" The lights went out, complete, total darkness, the kind that pressed against your eyes like a physical force. For 3 heartbeats, the only sound was Victor's pulse hammering in his ears. Then the backup generators kicked in with a mechanical shriek, and the lights flickered back on, dimmer now, struggling. "We need to move." Reeves' voice was urgent. "If the generators fail during surgery, they won't." Victor pulled the needle from his arm himself, ignoring the tech's gasp of protest. 20 minutes. My people are bringing mobile power. 20 minutes we may not have. Ms. Wynn's condition is deteriorating." Victor was on his feet, steadying himself against the wall as the room tilted. "Then we operate now. Use what blood you have, and when the mobile unit arrives, you'll have more." Reeves made a decision. "Prep OR3. Get Kane into surgical observation, and someone get me Ms. Wynn's latest vitals." The next 10 minutes were a blur of organized chaos. Victor was suited up in surgical gear, gown, mask, gloves, and stationed in the observation area of Operating Room 3. Through the glass, he watched them wheel Lila in, her form so small on the massive surgical table. The surgical team moved with practiced efficiency, adjusting equipment, checking monitors, preparing instruments that gleamed under the harsh lights. Reeves stood at the head of the table, his gloved hands steady, his eyes focused. "Scalpel," he said, his voice calm. And the generator blew. The explosion was muffled but unmistakable, a deep whump that shook the walls and plunged the OR into darkness. Emergency lights kicked in immediately, battery-powered beacons that cast everything in ghostly white. Then the alarm started, machines screaming, monitors flatlined into that terrible sustained note that Victor would hear in his nightmares for the rest of his life. Through the chaos, through the shouts of the medical staff, he heard it, the sound of Lila's heart stopping. Victor didn't think, didn't plan, didn't calculate odds or consequences. He moved. The observation room door was locked, meant to keep non-medical personnel out during procedures. Victor hit it with his shoulder, 200 pounds of desperate fury, and the lock shattered. He burst into the OR as nurses screamed at him to stop, as someone grabbed his arm and he shook them off. "Get out!" Reeves shouted, not looking up from where he was starting compressions on Lila's chest. "This is a sterile—" "Save her!" Victor roared, the sound raw and animal. "Whatever you need, whatever it takes. We need power. We need blood. We need—" Reeves broke off as the emergency lights flickered. "You have both." Victor was at the table, looking down at Lila's pale face, seeing the blue tinge to her lips. "The mobile unit is minutes away. Use me. Take whatever you need." "Mr. Kane, you've already donated." "I said take it." Victor grabbed a nurse's arm, pushing up his sleeve. "Take my plasma. Take my platelets. Take whatever keeps her alive until that power arrives." Reeves stared at him for one crystalline moment, and Victor saw the decision form in the surgeon's eyes. "Get him an IV line," Reeves snapped. "Direct plasma transfer, bypass the testing, and someone find out where that mobile unit is." Nurses swarmed Victor, pushing him onto a stool next to the table. Someone swabbed his arm with alcohol, inserted a needle with brutal efficiency. He felt the tug as they connected him directly to Lila's IV, his blood flowing into her veins. He watched the monitor, praying to gods he'd stopped believing in years ago. The flatline continued, that terrible eternal note. "Come on," Victor whispered, his hand finding Lila's where it lay on the table. Her skin was cold, too cold. "Come on, Lila. Come back, please." Reeves was calling out orders, medications, compressions, instructions Victor didn't understand. The surgical team moved like a choreographed dance, each person performing their role in the desperate attempt to restart a heart that had given up. Time stretched. 1 minute, 2. Victor felt his own heartbeat slowing as they pulled his blood, felt the fog creeping in at the edges of his vision. He didn't care. If she died, he wanted to go with her. He deserved to go with her. "I'm sorry," he told her, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry, Lila. I should have believed you. I should have trusted you. I should have—" The monitor beeped, one single, tentative beep, then another. The flatline broke into a rhythm, weak, erratic, but a rhythm nonetheless. "We have cardiac activity," someone shouted. "BP is rising, 60 over 40, 65 over 42. Oxygen saturation climbing. Reeves didn't celebrate, didn't pause. "We're not out of this yet. Baby's heart rate is critical. We need to deliver now, or we'll lose them both. Where is that power?" As if summoned by the question, Victor heard it, the rumble of diesel engines, the shout of voices outside. "Mobile unit is here," Sarah Chen burst through the door. "They're connecting it now." "How long?" Reeves demanded. 2 minutes." "We don't have 2 minutes." The surgeon's jaw was set. "Prep for emergency delivery. Battery lights only. We're doing this now." The surgical team shifted instantly, moving into new positions. Victor felt someone trying to remove his IV, to pull him away from the table, but he shook them off. "I'm staying." "Mr. Kane, you've lost too much blood." "I'm staying." Maybe Reeves saw something in Victor's eyes, or maybe he just didn't have time to argue. He nodded once, then turned his full attention to the surgery. Scalpel. In the dim glow of battery-powered emergency lights, Dr. Marcus Reeves began to cut. Victor had seen terrible things in his life, had done terrible things, had watched men die slowly, had held power over life and death like a crown. But nothing had prepared him for watching them cut into the woman he loved, seeing her blood, bright and red and far too much of it, knowing that every second counted and they were already behind. The surgical team worked in near silence, their movements precise despite the terrible conditions. Victor's vision was graying at the edges, his body demanding blood it no longer had, but he kept his eyes open through sheer force of will. He would witness this. Every moment. It was the least he owed her. "There's the uterine wall," Reeves murmured. "Careful. The abruption is worse than the ultrasound showed. Suction. More suction." And then, through the blood and the chaos and the dying light, Victor heard it. A cry. Thin, wavering, angry at being pulled into a world that was already trying to kill it. The most beautiful sound he'd ever heard. "It's a boy," someone said, and Victor watched through blurring vision as they lifted a tiny, blood-covered creature into the light. 7 pounds, 3 ounces. APGAR score of... The lights blazed back to life. The mobile generator had connected, sending power surging through the hospital. Monitors sprang back to life, machines hummed. The OR transformed from a desperate battlefield into a proper surgical suite in an instant. "Thank God," Reeves breathed. Then louder. "Get that baby to NICU. And someone get more blood up here. We're not done yet." They whisked the baby away, and Victor tried to follow with his eyes but couldn't make his head turn. He was so tired, so cold. His hand was still holding Lila's, and he gave it the gentlest squeeze. "We have a son," he whispered to her unconscious form. "We have a son, Lila. And I swear on everything I am, I'm going to be better for him. For both of you." The last thing Victor saw before the darkness claimed him was the monitor above Lila's head, showing a heartbeat that was growing stronger. Then the world went black, and Victor Kane, crime lord, king of shadows, architect of empires, collapsed beside the table, his blood inside her veins, his promise hanging in the air like a prayer. Victor woke to the smell of antiseptic and the steady beep of monitoring equipment. His head felt like it had been stuffed with cotton, his mouth dry as sand. Every muscle in his body ached with the deep, bone-weary exhaustion that came from pushing past human limits. For a moment he couldn't remember where he was or why everything hurt. Then it all came rushing back. The storm, the hospital, Lila's pale face on the surgical table, the tiny cry of a newborn breaking through chaos. His eyes snapped open. He was in a recovery room, an IV drip feeding fluids back into his depleted body. Pale dawn light filtered through the window, painting everything in shades of gray. The storm had passed, leaving behind that eerie stillness that always followed nature's fury. Victor sat up too fast, and the room tilted sickeningly. He gripped the bed rail, forcing his vision to clear, his body to obey. A nurse appeared in the doorway, her eyes widening when she saw him moving. "Mr. Kane, you need to lie back down. You lost a dangerous amount of blood, and Dr. Reeves specifically said, 'Where is she?'" Victor's voice was a rasp, his throat raw. "Where's Lila?" The nurse hesitated, and in that fraction of a second, Victor's heart stopped. He knew that look, had seen it on the faces of people delivering bad news his entire life. It was the expression of someone trying to figure out how to tell you that everything had gone wrong. "Mr. Kane, please, you need to—" Victor ripped the IV from his arm, ignoring the sharp sting and the blood that immediately welled up. He was on his feet before the nurse could react, swaying but upright, driven by a terror that made the physical pain irrelevant. "Tell me she's alive." The words came out somewhere between a command and a prayer. "Tell me right now, or I will tear this hospital apart room by room until I find her." "She's alive!" The nurse blurted it out, hands raised in a placating gesture. "She's alive, Mr. Kane. She made it through surgery, but—" Victor didn't wait to hear the rest. He pushed past her into the hallway, his bare feet silent on the cold linoleum. He was still wearing the surgical scrubs, now stained with his own blood and Lila's, looking like he'd walked out of a war zone. Maybe he had. "Mr. Kane, wait!" The nurse was following him, her voice rising. "You can't just— Security!" Victor ignored her, his eyes scanning the hallway signs. Recovery. ICU. Maternity. He headed toward recovery, his pace quickening despite the way his vision swam with each step. Behind him, he heard the squawk of radios, the sound of heavy footsteps, security responding to the commotion. He didn't care. A large man in a security uniform stepped into his path, hand raised. "Sir, I need you to stop right there." Victor looked at the guard, really looked at him, and whatever the man saw in Victor's eyes made him take an involuntary step backward. This was the face Victor wore when he walked into a room full of enemies, the face that had made hardened criminals swear loyalty out of sheer survival instinct. "Move," Victor said softly, "or I will move you." The guard's hand dropped to his radio, but before he could call for backup, a familiar voice cut through the tension. "Let him through, James." Dr. Reeves appeared from around the corner, still in his surgical scrubs, looking like he hadn't slept in a week. Probably hadn't. The surgeon's eyes were red-rimmed but alert, and he carried himself with the exhausted satisfaction of someone who'd just won a battle they weren't sure they could win. "Dr. Reeves, hospital policy states that—" the guard began. "I'm aware of hospital policy. I'm also aware that Mr. Kane donated enough blood last night to put himself in the ICU, and he has a right to see the woman and child he saved. Let him through." The guard looked between them, clearly torn between following protocol and challenging the head of surgery. Wisely, he chose self-preservation and stepped aside. Reeves gestured for Victor to follow him. They walked in silence through the recovery ward, past rooms filled with the beeping of machines and the low murmur of nurses making their rounds. The dawn light grew stronger, painting the hallway in shades of pink and gold. "How is she?" Victor asked finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "Alive." Reeves didn't sugarcoat it, didn't offer false comfort. "The surgery was successful, but it was close. Closer than I like. We had to perform a complete hysterectomy to stop the bleeding. She'll never be able to have more children." The words hit Victor like a physical blow, but he forced himself to keep walking. "Does she know?" "Not yet. She hasn't woken up. The anesthesia, combined with the blood loss and trauma, her body needs time to recover. It could be hours before she's conscious. maybe longer. They stopped outside a door marked Recovery 7. Through the small window, Victor could see her, Lila, small and still in the hospital bed, surrounded by machines that monitored every heartbeat, every breath. Her dark hair was pulled back from her face, making her look impossibly young, impossibly fragile. And the baby? Victor couldn't take his eyes off her. Healthy. 7 pounds, 3 ounces, perfect APGAR scores once we got him stabilized. He's in the NICU for observation, but that's standard procedure for emergency deliveries. He should be fine. Should be. The doctor's words were careful, measured. No promises, no guarantees, just the reality of medicine. Sometimes you did everything right and still lost. Victor's hand was on the door handle when Reeves spoke again. Mr. Kane, before you go in there, you should know something. When Miss Wynn regains consciousness, she's going to be angry, hurt, confused. She's going to have questions about why you're here, what happened, why she can't have more children. And she's going to be vulnerable in a way that makes people say and do things they might not mean. Victor looked at the surgeon, saw the warning in the older man's eyes. I'm not here to manipulate her, Victor said quietly. I'm here because I owe her the truth, and an apology she'll probably never accept. Good. Reeves nodded once. Because if you hurt that woman again, donation or no donation, I'll make sure you regret it. Victor almost smiled. Almost. Get in line, doctor. He pushed open the door and stepped inside. The room was quiet except for the rhythmic beep of the heart monitor and the soft hiss of oxygen flowing through the tubes in her nose. Victor moved to the chair beside her bed and sat down carefully, his body protesting every movement. Up close, she looked even more fragile. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, with dark circles under her eyes that spoke of months of stress he'd caused. Her hands lay on top of the blanket, small and delicate. The fingers he'd once watched paint beautiful landscapes on canvas, now connected to IVs. Victor reached out, hesitated, then gently took her hand in his. Her skin was cool but warming, her pulse steady against his fingers. I'm sorry, he whispered, the words inadequate and enormous all at once. I'm so sorry, Lila. For everything. For not believing you, for throwing you out. For every moment of fear and pain you've lived through because I was too broken to see what was right in front of me. She didn't respond, didn't move, and Victor hadn't expected her to, but he kept talking anyway, the words pouring out like blood from a wound. I told myself I was protecting myself, that everyone who got close had an agenda, that love was just another word for leverage. I built walls so high I couldn't see over them anymore. And when you tried to climb them, when you loved me despite everything I am, I panicked. I pushed you away because I'm a coward, Lila, a paranoid, damaged coward who doesn't deserve a second chance. The heart monitor beeped steadily, impartial witness to his confession. But we have a son now. A son I haven't even met yet because I collapsed like an idiot. And he deserves better than what I am. He deserves a father who isn't afraid of love, who doesn't see threats in every act of kindness. He deserves what I never had, safety, stability, someone who chooses him every single day. Victor's grip on her hand tightened, careful not to dislodge the IV. I can't change what I did, can't take back the words or the night I made you walk away, but I can change what happens next. I can be better. I will be better, for him, for you, if you'll let me. And if you won't, if you tell me to leave and never come back, I'll respect that. But I'll still make sure you both have everything you need, protection, money, whatever it takes to give you the life you deserve. The door opened behind him, and Victor turned to see Sarah Chen enter with a tablet in her hands. The young nurse looked exhausted but managed a small smile when she saw him. Mr. Kane, I'm glad you're awake. How are you feeling? Like I donated 3 units of blood I shouldn't have. That's because you did. Sarah pulled up a second chair, sitting down with a sigh. Dr. Reeves wants you on IV fluids for at least 6 more hours, bed rest for 48, and a strict diet to rebuild your iron levels. He also said, and I quote, "Tell Kane if he does something that stupid again, I'll sedate him myself." Noted. Victor didn't take his eyes off Lila. When will she wake up? Hard to say. Her body went through significant trauma, the surgery, the blood loss, The stress of the abruption, she needs time to heal. Could be an hour, could be 6. We're monitoring her closely. Victor nodded, still watching the steady rise and fall of Lila's chest. The evidence that she was alive, that he hadn't lost her completely. "There's someone who wants to meet you," Sarah said gently. "If you're up for it." Victor's head snapped toward her. "The baby?" "Your son." The NICU nurse said he's stable, and Dr. Reeves approved a visit. You'd have to scrub in and wear protective gear, but yes, if you want to meet him. Want to? Victor's chest tightened with an emotion he couldn't name. Terror and longing mixed into something that felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. He looked at Lila, still unconscious, still fighting her way back to the world. "I don't want to leave her." "I'll stay with her," Sarah promised. "The moment anything changes, I'll come get you. But Mr. Kane, he's your son. He should meet his father." Victor stood slowly, his body protesting but obeying. He squeezed Lila's hand one more time, then followed Sarah out of the room. The NICU was a world unto itself, quiet and controlled, filled with the soft beeps of monitors and the occasional cry of a newborn. Sarah led him to a scrub station where he washed his hands with antibacterial soap, then helped him into a gown, mask, and gloves. "He's in isolate 3, Sarah said, pointing toward a corner of the room. "Take your time." Victor walked toward the designated spot, his heart hammering so hard he thought it might break through his ribs. He'd faced down armed enemies without flinching, had stared death in the face more times than he could count, but nothing had prepared him for this. The isolate was a clear plastic box, temperature-controlled and sterile. Inside, swaddled in a white blanket with a tiny blue cap on his head, was the smallest human Victor had ever seen, his son. Victor's breath caught in his throat. The baby was perfect, impossibly perfect. Tiny fingers curled into fists, a button nose, lips pursed in sleep, dark hair peeking out from under the cap. He looked peaceful, unaware of the chaos that had surrounded his birth, the violence of the world he'd been born into. "You can touch him," a NICU nurse said softly, appearing at Victor's elbow. "There are ports in the side. Just be gentle." Victor's hands were shaking as he reached through the port, his large, scarred fingers looking ridiculous next to something so delicate. He brushed the baby's cheek with one finger, feeling the impossible softness of new skin, the warmth of life. The baby stirred, making a small sound of protest, and Victor froze. "It's okay," the nurse encouraged. "He knows you're there. Babies can sense their parents." Parents? The word settled over Victor like a weight and a gift simultaneously. He was a parent now, a father, responsible for this tiny, perfect creature who didn't know yet what kind of man had helped create him. "Hey," Victor whispered, his voice rough. "Hey there, little one. I'm your dad. Your terribly flawed, completely unprepared, absolutely terrified dad." The baby's eyes opened, just a crack, unfocused and dark, looking at nothing and everything. "I don't know how to do this," Victor continued, the confession easier somehow when speaking to someone who couldn't judge him. "I don't know how to be what you need. My own father was a monster who taught me that strength meant cruelty and love was weakness. I've spent my whole life proving him right, building an empire on the things he taught me." He stroked the baby's tiny hand, and the fingers curled reflexively around his own much larger one. The grip was weak but insistent, and Victor felt something crack open in his chest. "But I'm going to try. I'm going to try to be better, to give you what I never had, safety, love, a father who chooses you every single day. I don't know if I can do it. Don't know if I can change enough, fast enough, to be what you deserve. But I'm going to try." The baby yawned, a tiny sound, and settled back to sleep, still holding Victor's finger, still trusting in that way only the very young could trust, completely, without reservation, without knowing any better. Victor stood there for a long time, watching his son sleep, feeling the weight of responsibility settle over him like armor. This was what he was protecting now, not territory or reputation or power. This small, perfect life that had no idea what kind of chaos it had been born into. "Mr. Kane?" Sarah's voice came from behind him, urgent. "She's waking up." Victor's head snapped around. "Lila?" Dr. Reeves just called. Her vitals are changing. She's regaining consciousness. Victor looked at his son one more time, memorizing the tiny face, the way his chest rose and fell with each breath. Then he carefully extracted his finger from the baby's grip and stepped back. "I'll be back," he promised the sleeping infant. "We both will." He followed Sarah back through the hospital corridors, his pace quickening despite his body's protests. By the time they reached Recovery 7, Dr. Reeves was already inside, checking monitors and making notes on his tablet. "She's surfacing," Reeves said without looking up. "But take it slow. She's disoriented and in pain. The last thing she needs is overwhelming stimulation." Victor nodded, moving to the chair beside her bed. Lila's eyes were moving beneath her closed lids, her fingers twitching against the blanket. Her breathing had changed, becoming less regular, more reactive. Then her eyes opened. For a moment, she just stared at the ceiling, unfocused and confused. Then her gaze found Dr. Reeves, traveled around the room, and finally landed on Victor. He watched recognition dawn in her dark eyes, saw the confusion give way to shock, then anger, then something that looked like pain so deep it made his chest ache. "You?" she whispered, her voice hoarse from the breathing tube they'd removed. "What are you doing here?" Victor opened his mouth, but no words came out. What could he possibly say that would make any of this better? Lila tried to sit up, gasped at the pain, and fell back against the pillows. "Where am I? What happened? The baby?" Her hands flew to her stomach, feeling the bandages, the absence of the life she'd been carrying. "Where's my baby?" "Ms. Wynn, please stay calm." Dr. Reeves moved to her side, his voice professionally soothing. "You're at Mercy Ridge Hospital. You had an emergency C-section. Your son is healthy and in the NICU. "Son?" Tears spilled down her cheeks, and she looked at Victor with something that might have been accusation or pleading or both. "I have a son?" 7 pounds, 3 ounces, Victor managed, his voice barely above a whisper. "Perfect. He's perfect, Lila. I want to see him. I need to." She tried to move again, and this time the pain made her cry out. "Not yet," Reeves said firmly. "You've been through major surgery. Your body needs time to heal before you can be moved. But I promise, as soon as you're stable, we'll bring him to you." Lila's eyes never left Victor's face. "Why are you here? How did you even know?" "The hospital called me. You listed me as your emergency contact." "I did that months ago, before—" Her voice broke, and she looked away. "Before you threw me out. I never changed it. I should have changed it." The words cut deeper than any knife. Victor had taken bullets that hurt less than this. "Lila, don't." She held up a trembling hand. "Don't say anything. I can't. I don't want to hear it. Whatever you came here to say, whatever you think you owe me, I don't want it." "Doctor." Reeves cleared his throat. "I'll give you two some privacy. But Ms. Wynn, try not to stress yourself. Your body has been through significant trauma, and you need to remain calm. I'll be right outside if you need anything." He left, and the silence that filled the room was suffocating. Victor sat frozen in his chair, watching Lila cry silent tears that she kept wiping away with angry swipes. She looked so small in the hospital bed, so broken, and he had done this to her, had caused this pain. "I'm sorry," he said finally, because he couldn't not say it, even if she didn't want to hear it. "I'm so sorry, Lila, for everything, for not believing you, for what I said that night, for every moment of fear and pain you've lived through because I was too damaged to see the truth." "Stop." Her voice was sharp, cutting. "Just stop, Victor. You don't get to do this. You don't get to show up here and apologize and think that makes everything okay." "I know it doesn't. Nothing I say or do can make this okay, but you deserve to hear it anyway. You deserved to hear it 6 months ago." Lila laughed, but it was a bitter sound, empty of humor. 6 months ago, I stood in your mansion, soaking wet and terrified, and told you I was pregnant. Do you remember what you said to me?" Victor's jaw clenched. "Every word. You called me a liar, a gold digger. You asked me how much your enemies paid me to trap you." She was looking at him now, her eyes blazing with a fury that was somehow worse than tears. "You made me feel like nothing, like I was some kind of scheme, some plot against you. Do you have any idea what that did to me? Lila, I loved you. The words burst out of her like a wound bleeding. I loved you with everything I had, and you looked at me like I was dirt on your shoes, like our baby was some kind of con. I walked out of your house that night wanting to die, Victor. Actually wanting to die because the thought of living in a world where you could look at me that way was unbearable. Victor felt like he'd been gutted. I was wrong about all of it. I was paranoid and scared and so convinced that everyone had an agenda that I couldn't see. See what? That I actually loved you? That someone could look at Victor Kane, crime lord and killer, and see something worth loving? She was crying openly now, not bothering to wipe the tears away. I knew what you were. I knew about the Empire, the violence, all of it. And I didn't care because underneath all that armor, I saw someone who was just scared and alone. Someone who needed to be loved. You did see that. Victor's hands were clenched into fists to keep from reaching for her. You saw me better than anyone ever has, and that terrified me. Because if you could see that far inside, you could hurt me worse than any enemy, so I hurt you first. Congratulations. Lila's voice was cold now, empty. You succeeded. You hurt me so badly I couldn't function for weeks. I cried myself to sleep every night. I lost 15 pounds I couldn't afford to lose. I thought about not having this baby because I couldn't stand the thought of him looking like you, reminding me of you every single day. Victor felt like he'd been shot. Lila, but I kept him anyway, because he was mine. Because he deserved a chance at life, even if his father didn't want him. And I built a life without you. I got a job, found an apartment, made plans. I was doing fine. She laughed bitterly. Or at least I was surviving. And now you're here, and you're sorry, and somehow I'm supposed to just forgive you? No. Victor's voice was quiet but firm. You're not supposed to forgive me. You're supposed to hate me, to tell me to leave and never come back. That's what I deserve. Then why are you here? The question was almost a wail. Why did you come, Victor? Why couldn't you just let me hate you from a distance? Because the hospital called and said you were dying. The words came out raw, stripped of any defense. Because they said our son might not make it, and the thought of you dying, of never getting to tell you I was wrong, that I was sorry, that you were right about everything. I couldn't breathe. I drove through a storm that should have killed me because the alternative was living in a world where you were gone and you died thinking I didn't care. Lila stared at him, fresh tears streaming down her face. Well, I didn't die. So you can go now. You can leave with a clear conscience, knowing you apologized and never come back. I don't want to leave. Victor met her gaze steadily. I want to be here. I want to meet our son. I want to help you, take care of you, be what you both need. We don't need you. But her voice wavered and they both heard it. Maybe not. Probably not. But I need you. The confession felt like pulling his heart out through his throat. I need to do this, Lila, to be better, to try to make up for even a fraction of what I've done. Even if you never forgive me, even if you tell me to stay away after you're recovered, I need to try. Before Lila could respond, the door burst open. Dr. Reeves rushed in, his face grave, and behind him came Sarah Chen pushing a clear isolette. Miss Wynn? Reeves said urgently. I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a situation. Your son's oxygen levels dropped suddenly. We need to monitor him closely, and having you near might help stabilize him. Skin-to-skin contact can sometimes... Bring him here. Lila was already trying to sit up, ignoring the pain. Please, I need to see him. The nurses carefully lifted the tiny bundle from the isolette, wires and monitors trailing, and placed him against Lila's chest. She cradled him with trembling hands, tears falling on his tiny face as she looked at him for the first time. Oh, she breathed, the sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. Oh, you're so beautiful. You're so perfect. The baby made a small sound, his tiny face scrunching up, and Lila kissed his forehead with infinite gentleness. Victor watched from his chair, feeling like an intruder in a moment that should have been shared between parents, but was instead split by the chasm he'd created. He wanted to touch the baby, to be part of this. But he had no right. Then Lila looked up at him, her eyes red and swollen but focused. Come here, she said quietly. Victor hesitated. Lila, I don't... Come here, Victor. He moved to the edge of the bed, looking down at the tiny face nestled against Lila's chest. His son. Their son. This is your father, Lila whispered to the baby, and Victor wasn't sure if the words were an introduction or an indictment. He's an idiot who broke my heart, but he gave his blood to save our lives last night, so I guess he's not completely worthless. Victor's throat was so tight he couldn't speak. He watched the baby's chest rise and fall, saw the monitors stabilizing as the infant responded to his mother's touch. I can't forgive you, Lila said, not looking at Victor. Not yet. Maybe not ever. What you did, how you made me feel, that doesn't just go away. I know. But this baby deserves a father. A real father, not just money and protection from a distance. So if you meant what you said about being better, about trying, then you have one chance. One. You screw this up, you hurt him the way you hurt me, and I will make sure you regret it in ways you can't imagine. Victor looked at her finally, saw the steel beneath the tears, the mother bear protecting her cub. This was the woman he'd thrown away, not weak, not fragile, but fierce and unbreakable. I won't hurt him, Victor promised, the words a vow. Or you, not again. I'll spend every day proving that if you let me. We'll see. Lila's attention returned to the baby, her voice softening. We'll see if you mean it. Words are easy, Victor. It's the actions that count. Dr. Reeves cleared his throat. His oxygen levels are normalizing. Whatever you're doing, it's working. Keep him close, Ms. Wynne. I'll have the nurses bring in a cot so you can rest together. As the medical team busied themselves arranging the room, Victor stood beside the bed, watching the woman he'd destroyed and the child he'd saved, and made a silent promise. He would be better. He would change. He would earn them. Whatever it took. However long it required. He would earn the second chance he didn't deserve. The next 72 hours blurred together in a haze of feeding schedules, diaper changes, and the relentless beeping of medical equipment. Victor had faced down armed militias with more composure than he managed around a 7-pound infant who seemed determined to test every limit of his non-existent parenting skills. He'd moved into the hospital, claiming the chair beside Lila's bed as his new territory. The staff protested at first, citing visiting hours and patient rest requirements, until Victor made it clear through a combination of substantial donations and thinly veiled threats that he wasn't going anywhere. Dr. Reeves eventually intervened, deciding that having Victor present and cooperative was preferable to having him cause problems from outside. Lila still wasn't speaking to him beyond the bare necessities. When the baby cried, she'd hand him over with clipped instructions, support his head, check his diaper, warm the bottle to body temperature. And Victor would fumble through each task like he was defusing a bomb, which in a way, he was. One wrong move and everything could explode. But slowly, incrementally, something shifted. It happened in small moments. The first time Victor successfully got the baby to stop crying, rocking him with an awkward gentleness that made Lila's lips twitch despite herself. The night Victor stayed awake for 6 straight hours so Lila could sleep, pacing the room with their son against his chest, whispering stories about a better life than the one he'd lived. The morning Victor brought Lila real coffee from the cafe down the street instead of the hospital sludge, remembering without being asked that she took it with cream and 2 sugars. On the 3rd day, as Victor was changing a diaper with the intense concentration of a man disarming explosives, Lila finally spoke more than instructions. You're getting better at that. Victor looked up, startled. Lila was sitting up in bed, her color improved, the dark circles under her eyes less pronounced. She still looked fragile, but there was a strength returning to her features that hadn't been there before. I had to watch 3 YouTube videos to figure out the proper folding technique, Victor admitted, fastening the diaper tabs with more confidence than he felt. Apparently there's an art to it. You watched parenting videos? Something that might have been amusement flickered across her face. 17 of them. Everything from diaper changing to recognizing different types of cries to proper burping techniques. Victor lifted the baby carefully, supporting his head the way the videos had demonstrated. I've also ordered 23 books on infant care and child development. They should arrive at my house tomorrow. Lila was quiet for a moment, watching him cradle their son. Why? Why what? Why are you trying so hard? You could just write a check, hire the best nanny money can buy, and go back to your empire. That's what most men in your position would do. Victor settled into the chair, the baby warm against his chest. I'm not most men, and I told you I wanted to be better. That requires actually learning how to be a father, not just paying someone else to do it. You've been here for 3 days straight. Don't you have business to attend to? An empire to run? I have people handling things. Victor's voice was carefully neutral. And the business that can't wait, I'm conducting from here. What he didn't tell her was that he'd spent those 3 days systematically dismantling his criminal empire. Phone calls made in the hallway at 2 in the morning, transferring operations to trusted lieutenants with instructions to liquidate and legitimize. Meetings conducted via encrypted video chat in the hospital chapel, selling off territories and assets for fractions of their worth just to get them off his hands quickly. His accountant had called him insane. His lawyer had questioned his mental state. Dmitry Volkov had shown up at the hospital personally, demanding to know what kind of breakdown Victor was having. You're giving away the West Side? Dmitry had stood in the hallway, his scarred face incredulous. That territory generates $15 million a year. Then it'll generate $15 million for you. Consider it a gift. Kane, what the hell is going on? You don't just walk away from an empire you built over 20 years. Victor had looked through the window at Lila sleeping with their son in her arms, and the answer was so simple it hurt. I'm choosing a different empire, one that actually matters. Now holding his son while Lila watched with guarded eyes, Victor felt the weight of those choices. Every territory sold, every operation transferred, every bridge burned with the underworld, they were all bets placed on a future he hadn't earned yet. What are you thinking about? Lila asked, her voice softer than it had been in days. Names. We should probably name him. He can't be the baby forever. Lila's expression closed off slightly, and Victor realized he'd overstepped. We implied a partnership they didn't have, a future that wasn't guaranteed. I've been thinking about that, Lila said carefully. I like Alexander. It means defender of men. And maybe he can be that, someone who defends instead of destroys. The implication wasn't subtle, but Victor didn't flinch from it. Alexander is a good name, strong, classic. Alexander James, maybe. James was my father's name. Victor nodded, looking down at the baby, at Alexander, who was falling asleep against his chest. Alexander James, I like it. You don't get a say. The words were sharp, defensive. I'm just telling you what I've decided. Okay. Victor kept his voice level, not rising to the bait. Then, Alexander James it is. It's a good name, Lila. Your father would be proud. He saw her eyes glisten, watched her look away quickly. Her father had died when she was 16, Victor remembered. Cancer. She told him about it once, late at night when the walls between them had been thin, when she'd trusted him with the painful parts of her history, before he'd proven he didn't deserve that trust. My father was a good man, Lila said quietly. He worked construction, came home covered in dust every night, and never once raised his voice to my mother or me. He taught me that strength wasn't about intimidation or fear. It was about showing up, doing the hard work, being there even when it wasn't easy. Victor heard the comparison she wasn't making directly, felt the weight of it anyway. I would have liked to meet him, he said. He would have hated you. Lila's voice was matter-of-fact, not cruel. Everything you represent, everything you do, it would have made him sick. He believed in honest work, in building things instead of tearing them down. He would have taken one look at you and told me to run. He would have been right. Lila looked at him then, really looked at him, searching for something in his face. So why didn't I? Run, I mean. Even after I found out what you really were, who you really were, I stayed. I told myself I could see past it, that underneath the crime lord was a good man waiting to be found. Was I just stupid? You weren't stupid, you were hopeful. And I was terrified of that hope because it meant I might actually have to be better. And I didn't know if I could. And now? The question hung between them, heavy with implications. Do you know if you can? Victor looked down at Alexander, sleeping peacefully despite the tension in the room. This tiny person who had no idea his existence was the catalyst for everything changing. Who would grow up with questions about his father that would be difficult to answer? Who deserved better than the legacy of violence and fear that Victor had built? I don't know, Victor admitted, the honesty painful. I don't know if I can be what he needs, what you need. But I'm going to try, Lila. Every single day, I'm going to try. Before Lila could respond, Dr. Reeves entered with a tablet and a professional smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Miss Wynne, I have your discharge papers. Your vitals are stable, the incision is healing well, and while I'd prefer to keep you another day or two, you're medically cleared to go home if you feel ready. Home. The words settled over the room like a weight. Lila's apartment was a studio in a neighborhood that barely qualified as safe, 45 minutes from the hospital, with stairs she'd have to climb while recovering from major surgery. Victor had already seen the address in her file, had already sent people to assess it, had already made plans he knew she'd reject. I'm ready, Lila said, lifting her chin. I need to get out of here. No offense, Dr. Reeves. None taken. Hospital beds aren't designed for comfort. Reeves pulled up a chair, his expression shifting to the serious mode that meant difficult conversations were coming. Before you leave, we need to discuss your long-term care. The hysterectomy was necessary to save your life, but it's going to require a recovery period. No heavy lifting, no strenuous activity. Someone needs to be with you to help with the baby for at least 2 weeks, preferably 4. I'll be fine. Lila's voice was too bright, too quick. I can manage. Miss Wynne, you won't be able to lift your son for several weeks. The incision needs time to heal, and any strain could cause complications. You'll need help with basic tasks, cooking, cleaning, carrying the baby up and down stairs. Victor saw the moment Lila's bravado cracked, saw the fear slip through. She had no family in the city. Her mother had passed when she was young, her father years later. The friends she'd mentioned in their brief time together had scattered after Victor had isolated her, occupying all her time until her world had narrowed to just him. Another thing he'd destroyed. I'll hire a nurse, Lila said, but her voice wavered. Or a nanny, someone who can... I'll do it. Victor spoke before he could second-guess himself. I'll stay with you. Help with Alexander, with whatever you need. Lila's head snapped toward him, eyes wide. No, absolutely not. Lila, be reasonable. Be reasonable? Her laugh was sharp, almost hysterical. You want to move into my apartment? The apartment I got specifically to get away from you? The place I built to be mine? Where I could feel safe? I'll sleep on the couch. I won't touch anything. I'll just be there to help with Alexander, to make sure you don't hurt yourself trying to do everything alone. No. Lila's hands were shaking. No, Victor. You don't get to do this. You don't get to swoop in and take over my life just because I'm vulnerable right now. Dr. Reeves cleared his throat. Perhaps there's a compromise. Ms. Wynne, you do need help. That's not negotiable from a medical standpoint. And Mr. Kane, while your offer is generous, I can see why Ms. Wynne might be uncomfortable with the arrangement. Then what do you suggest? Victor's voice was tight with frustration. She can't go home alone. She needs someone there 24/7 for at least the first week. There are professional care services, staffed by strangers. Victor cut him off. People she doesn't know, who don't know Alexander, who she'll have to trust with her most vulnerable moments. Is that really better? Lila was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. I hate this. I hate that you're right. I hate that I need help and my only option is the man who broke me. Victor felt like he'd been stabbed. Lila, don't. She held up a hand, wiping her tears with angry swipes. Just don't. If you're going to do this, we need rules, boundaries. You sleep on the couch. You don't go in my bedroom. You don't answer my phone or talk to my friends or make any decisions about Alexander without asking me first. This is temporary, just until I can manage on my own. And the second I tell you to leave, you leave. No arguments, no negotiations. Understood? Understood. Victor would have agreed to just about anything at that point. And you pay for a nurse to come in twice a day to check my incision and help with things I can't ask you for. Female nurse. Non-negotiable. Done. Lila looked at Dr. Reeves, her jaw set. Can you recommend someone? I'll have my office send over names. Reeves made a note on his tablet. And I'll schedule follow-up appointments for both you and Alexander. 2 weeks for you, 1 week for him. Any concerns before then? Fever, excessive bleeding, unusual pain, you come straight back here. They spent the next hour filling out paperwork and receiving discharge instructions. Victor called his driver to bring the Range Rover around, then realized with a sick feeling that he didn't have a car seat. Neither did Lila. The hospital provides them for families in need, a nurse explained when Victor asked, her voice carefully neutral. We can set one up for you. Victor watched them install the car seat in his Range Rover. This small piece of safety equipment that cost maybe $100 looking absurdly out of place in a vehicle worth 10 times that. Alexander fit into it perfectly, still sleeping despite being moved, unbothered by the chaos his parents were navigating around him. The drive to Lila's apartment was silent. She sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window at the city passing by, while Victor navigated streets he'd had his people scout 2 days ago. The neighborhood was worse than he'd imagined from the address. Graffiti-tagged buildings, bars on windows, groups of men loitering on corners who watched the Range Rover pass with hungry eyes. Victor's jaw clenched. She'd been living here, pregnant and alone, in a neighborhood where his enemies could have found her easily, where any random criminal could have... He forced the thoughts away. What was done. All he could control was what happened next. Lila's building was a 4-story walk-up with a broken front door and a lobby that smelled of mildew and old cooking. Victor carried the car seat with Alexander while Lila walked slowly ahead, one hand pressed to her incision. Her breathing labored by the time they reached the 3rd floor. The apartment was exactly what Victor expected. Small, clean, filled with secondhand furniture, and the kind of careful organization that came from having too little space and not enough money. A studio with a kitchenette in one corner, a bathroom the size of a closet, and a futon that served as both couch and bed. It's not much, Lila said defensively, moving to the futon and sitting down carefully. But it's mine. Victor set the car seat down gently, then looked around with the practiced eye of someone who'd spent decades assessing security vulnerabilities. No deadbolt on the door. Window locks that could be jimmied by a child. Thin walls that would broadcast every sound to neighbors who might or might not care about a woman's screams. We need to talk about security, he said. No, Lila's voice was firm. We need to talk about you staying in your lane. This is my home. These are my choices. Lila, the lock on your door wouldn't stop a determined teenager, and this neighborhood is all I can afford on a waitress salary. Not everyone has a mansion on a cliff, Victor. The barb hit home, as she'd intended. Victor crossed to the window looking out at the street below, where his Range Rover sat like a beacon, announcing wealth to anyone who cared to notice. It would be stripped within a week if he left it there. I'm going to have my security people install better locks, Victor said, keeping his voice level. And cameras in the hallway. Nothing inside, nothing that invades your privacy, just basic security measures. Victor, this isn't negotiable. He turned to face her. If I'm staying here, if I'm supposed to help keep you and Alexander safe, then I need to know you're actually safe. Better locks, cameras, and I'm parking the Range Rover in a secure lot and taking a cab here every day. Lila studied him for a long moment. You really think this neighborhood is that dangerous? I think you're a woman alone with a newborn in a building where anyone can walk in off the street. Yes, I think it's dangerous. She looked away and Victor saw the admission in her averted eyes. She'd been scared too. Had probably been scared for months, every creak of the floorboards, every raised voice in the hallway, every night she'd spent alone wondering if someone would break in. Fine, she said quietly. Locks and cameras. But nothing else. No armed guards, no security team, nothing that makes my neighbors think I'm suddenly under protection. Why? They should know. Because I still have to live here, Victor. After you leave, after you go back to your life, I'll still be here. And if my neighbors think I have connections to someone like you, I'll be a target. The logic was sound, and it made Victor's chest tighten. She was planning for his absence, preparing for the day he'd walk away, because she still didn't believe he'd stay. Fair enough. He hadn't given her any reason to believe it. Alexander started crying then, the soft mewling building into a full-throated wail. Lila moved to get up, gasped at the pain, and Victor was already there, lifting the baby from the car seat. I've got him. What does he need? Probably hungry. There are bottles in the bag, formula powder in the canister. Mix it according to the directions. Warm it under hot water. Test it on your wrist before feeding. Victor followed the instructions with the same precision he'd once used to plan operations, measuring formula, warming the bottle, testing the temperature. By the time he sat down on the futon with Alexander in his arms, the baby was working himself into a proper rage, his tiny face red with indignation. "Here you go, angry little man." Victor guided the bottle to Alexander's mouth, watched the baby latch on with desperate hunger. "There we go. See? Life's not so bad." Lila watched them, her expression unreadable. "You're natural at this. I watched 17 videos, remember? Still, most men would be panicking. Most men haven't had to stay calm while being shot at." Victor kept his eyes on Alexander, watching the baby's eyes drift closed as he fed. Perspective makes a screaming infant seem less terrifying. "Is that your life, being shot at?" Victor hesitated, knowing this was dangerous territory. "It was, past tense." "What does that mean?" "It means I'm making changes, stepping back from certain business activities, focusing on legitimate enterprises." "Because of him," Lila gestured to Alexander. "Because of both of you. Because I looked at what I was building and realized it was a legacy of violence I didn't want my son to inherit." Lila was quiet for a long moment. "You can't just walk away from that life, Victor. I know enough about your world to know it doesn't work that way. People don't let you just retire. They do if you make it worth their while. Transfer power, pay the right people, make sure your departure doesn't create a vacuum that leads to war. I've been doing this for 3 days now, selling territories, liquidating assets, setting up my lieutenants to take over." "You're dismantling your empire." It wasn't a question. "I'm building a different one where my son won't grow up wondering if his father will come home or end up dead in an alley." Lila's eyes were bright with unshed tears. 3 days ago, you would have laughed at someone saying that to you. You would have called them weak. 3 days ago, I hadn't held my son, hadn't watched the woman I love almost die because I was too paranoid to believe she could actually care about me. Victor looked up from Alexander to meet her gaze. "People change, Lila. Not often and not easily, but they do. I'm trying to be one of them." "Don't," Lila's voice broke. "Don't say you love me. You don't get to say that anymore." "Fine. I won't say it." Victor looked back down at Alexander, who was finishing his bottle with contented sucking sounds. "But it's still true." The apartment fell into silence, broken only by Alexander's feeding noises. Victor could feel Lila's eyes on him, could sense the war happening inside her, between the hurt that wanted to push him away and the exhaustion that needed his help. Finally, she spoke. "The futon folds out into a bed. There are sheets in the closet, pillows in the same place. The bathroom is barely big enough for one person, so we'll have to work out a schedule. There's not much food in the kitchen because I haven't been able to go shopping, and I can't cook right now anyway, so you'll have to handle meals." Victor nodded, committing each detail to memory. "I'll order groceries, stock the kitchen. What do you like to eat?" "I'm not picky, just nothing too heavy. My stomach's been sensitive since the surgery." "Understood. Anything else?" Lila wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly looking very small and very tired. "Yeah, don't make me regret this. Please, Victor. I'm trusting you with the most vulnerable moments of my life. Don't make me regret it." Victor stood carefully, Alexander still in his arms, and moved to the kitchenette to set up the bottle washing station. "I won't. I promise you, Lila. I won't." As the sun set outside the window, painting the shabby apartment in shades of gold, Victor Kane began the strangest chapter of his life. He'd commanded armies of criminals, controlled territories worth hundreds of millions, inspired fear in men twice his size. But nothing had prepared him for this. Learning to fold a futon into a bed, washing baby bottles with dish soap because he didn't know what else to use, ordering groceries from an app on his phone while Lila dozed on the bed and Alexander slept in his car seat. His phone buzzed with messages from his former world, Dmitri asking about final territory transfers, his lawyer questioning the sale of 3 waterfront properties, his accountant begging him to reconsider liquidating certain offshore accounts. Victor deleted them all. That life was over. This new one, messy and uncertain and terrifying in ways violence had never been, was beginning. He just hoped he could survive it. The first week passed in a blur of sleepless nights and small victories that felt monumental. Victor learned that 3 in the morning was when Alexander liked to scream loud enough to wake the entire building, that Lila took her coffee at exactly 6:15 each morning before the pain medication wore off, and that the sound of a grown woman crying in the shower because she couldn't wash her own hair without help was worse than any torture he'd ever witnessed. He learned to be invisible when Lila needed space and present when she needed help she was too proud to ask for. He learned that sometimes love meant standing outside the bathroom door while she struggled with basic tasks, ready to help, but not forcing his way in until she called for him. And he learned that the distance between them was measured not in feet, but in the thousands of small betrayals she couldn't forget. On the 8th day, Lila's incision started bleeding. Victor woke to her sharp intake of breath, the kind of sound that bypassed conscious thought and triggered every protective instinct he possessed. He was off the futon and across the small apartment before his eyes fully focused, finding Lila standing by the bed with her hand pressed to her abdomen, blood seeping through her fingers. "It just started," she said, her voice tight with pain and fear. "I got up to check on Alexander and felt something pull, and now—" "Sit down." Victor guided her back to the bed, his hands gentle despite the adrenaline flooding his system. "Let me see." Lila lifted her shirt with shaking hands, revealing the surgical incision that ran horizontally across her lower abdomen. The stitches on the left side had partially opened, blood welling from the wound in steady pulses. Victor's medical knowledge was limited to field dressing gunshot wounds and stopping bleeding long enough to get someone to an ER, but he knew enough to recognize this was bad. Not life-threatening yet, but it could become so if they didn't act fast. "I'm calling an ambulance," he said, already reaching for his phone. "No." Lila grabbed his wrist, her grip surprisingly strong. "No ambulance. The bill from the last hospital visit is already going to bankrupt me. Just, there's gauze in the bathroom cabinet. Press it against the wound, apply pressure, see if it stops." "Lila, this needs medical attention. Then call the nurse, the one who's supposed to come twice a day. She can look at it, tell us if we need to go to the ER. Lila's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Please, Victor, I can't afford another emergency room visit." Victor wanted to argue, wanted to throw her over his shoulder and carry her to the Range Rover and damn the consequences. But he saw the fear in her eyes, not just of the bleeding, but of the debt that would follow. This was her reality, the one he'd left her to navigate alone while he'd sat in his mansion drinking expensive scotch. "Fine. But if the nurse says you need an ER, we're going. No arguments." He retrieved the gauze and medical tape, his hand steady as he cleaned the wound and applied pressure. Lila hissed in pain, her fingers digging into the mattress, but she didn't cry out. Victor had seen hardened soldiers show less composure. The nurse arrived 20 minutes later, a competent woman in her 50s named Margaret, who took one look at the wound and frowned. "This needs to be resutured. The internal stitches are holding, but the external ones have failed. You'll need to go back to the hospital." "How much will that cost?" Lila asked, and Victor heard the defeat in her voice. Margaret glanced at Victor, then back to Lila. "With insurance, probably a few hundred for the ER visit. Without insurance, could be a couple thousand." "I don't have insurance anymore. Lost it when I left my last job." Victor's jaw clenched. She'd left her job because of the pregnancy, because morning sickness had made her shifts impossible, because he'd thrown her out and she'd had to rebuild her entire life. Another consequence of his paranoia. "I'll pay for it," Victor said. "No, Lila, this isn't negotiable. You need medical care. I'm paying for it. End of discussion." "I'm not your charity case. You're the mother of my child and you're bleeding because your body went through trauma saving our son. This isn't charity. This is the bare minimum of what I owe you." Margaret cleared her throat. "I hate to interrupt, but we need to make a decision soon. The longer we wait, the higher the risk of infection." Lila closed her eyes, and Victor watched her do the terrible math of poverty, weighing her pride against her health, her independence against her survival. It made him sick. "Fine," she whispered, "but I'm paying you back. Every cent. I don't care how long it takes." Victor wanted to argue, wanted to tell her she didn't owe him anything, that he owed her more than he could ever repay. But he knew pride was all she had left, so he nodded. Okay, we'll work out a payment plan. The lie came easily. He'd set up a trust fund in Alexander's name, make sure Lila never worried about money again, and let her think she was paying him back while the payments went into an account for their son's future. But that was a problem for later. They left Alexander with Margaret, who agreed to stay with the baby while they went to the hospital. Victor drove faster than was safe, one eye on the road and one on Lila, who sat pale and silent in the passenger seat with a towel pressed to her abdomen. "I'm sorry," she said suddenly. Victor glanced at her. For what? For being difficult, for not just letting you help without making it a fight every time. I know you're trying, and I keep pushing you away. You have every right to push me away. I broke your trust. That doesn't get fixed in a week. Still, you've been good with Alexander, patient with me, and I haven't even said thank you. I don't need thanks, Lila. I need you to be okay. She was quiet for a moment. Why? Why do you need me to be okay? You could just pay for everything from a distance, hire people to take care of us. You don't have to be here, sleeping on a futon in a bad neighborhood, changing diapers and washing bottles. So why? Victor kept his eyes on the road, but his hands tightened on the wheel. Because paying for things is easy. Being present is hard. And I've spent my entire life taking the easy path when it came to people. I used money and fear and power to keep everyone at a distance. It worked perfectly until I met you. What was different about me? You saw me, not Victor Kane, the crime lord, or the villain in expensive suits. You saw the scared kid I'd been, the broken man I'd become, and you didn't run. You stayed, and you loved me anyway. And that terrified me more than any enemy I'd ever faced. Lila wiped at her eyes. I did love you. Past tense. I don't know what I feel now. That's fair. I'll take past tense over nothing. The ER was less chaotic than it had been during the storm, but still busy with the usual parade of late-night emergencies. Victor got Lila checked in, his credit card ready before the receptionist could even ask about payment. They were taken back within 15 minutes, a speed that Victor suspected had more to do with the amount he donated to the hospital than any actual triage priority. Dr. Reeves appeared as they were getting settled in an exam room, his eyebrows rising when he saw them. Mr. Kane, Miss Wynne, I thought we'd seen the last of you for at least a few weeks. The stitches failed, Victor said. Wound opened up, started bleeding. Your nurse said it needed to be resutured. Reeves examined the wound with gentle efficiency, his expression neutral. The internal sutures are holding fine, which is what really matters. But yes, we'll need to close the external incision again. It's not uncommon with C-sections, especially when patients are more active than they should be. He looked pointedly at Lila. Have you been following the activity restrictions? Lila's cheeks flushed. I had to pick up Alexander. He was crying, and Victor was in the shower, and I just lifted a 7-pound baby, which is exactly what I told you not to do for at least 2 weeks. Reeves's voice was kind, but firm. Ms. Wynne, I understand you want to care for your son, but you can't do that if you tear yourself open and end up with a serious infection. You need to let Mr. Kane handle the heavy lifting, literally. I hate being helpless. You're not helpless. You're recovering from major surgery. There's a difference. Well, Reeves made notes on his tablet. I'm going to resuture this, write you a prescription for stronger antibiotics, and I want you on strict bed rest for the next week. That means no lifting, no reaching, no doing anything more strenuous than walking to the bathroom. Understood? Lila nodded miserably, and Victor felt his heart crack at the defeat in her posture. The resuturing took 20 minutes, with Victor holding Lila's hand while she gritted her teeth against the pain. No anesthesia this time, just local numbing that didn't quite kill all sensation. Victor felt every tension in her grip, saw every wince she tried to hide, and added it to the growing list of pain he'd caused her. When it was done, Reeves gave them both a long look. Mr. Kane, a word outside? Victor followed the surgeon into the hallway, leaving Lila to rest on the exam table. Reeves crossed his arms, his expression serious. I'm going to be frank with you. Miss Wynne's recovery is complicated by stress. Physical stress from trying to do too much, yes. but also emotional stress. And while I appreciate that you're trying to help, your presence in her life is also a source of that stress. Victor's jaw tightened. Are you telling me to leave? I'm telling you that healing requires more than just physical care. She needs peace, stability, and the emotional space to process what happened to her. If you can provide that, then stay. But if being around you is making things worse, you need to seriously consider whether your help is actually helping. The words hit like a punch to the gut, mainly because they might be true. Victor had been so focused on proving he could change, on being present and useful, that he hadn't stopped to consider whether his presence was hurting more than helping. I'll talk to her, Victor said quietly. Let her decide. Good man. Reeves clapped him on the shoulder. For what it's worth, I think you're trying. I've seen a lot of men in my career who wouldn't even do that much, but trying isn't always enough. They drove back to the apartment in silence. Margaret reported that Alexander had been perfect, sleeping through most of their absence and only waking once for a bottle. Victor paid her double her usual rate and thanked her for staying late. When they were alone again, Victor helped Lila into bed, adjusting pillows and making sure she was comfortable. Alexander was asleep in his bassinet, the apartment quiet except for the usual nighttime sounds of the building. We need to talk, Victor said, sitting on the edge of the bed. Lila looked at him warily. That never leads anywhere good. Dr. Reeves thinks my being here might be making things worse for you, causing stress that's interfering with your recovery. He said that? Not in those exact words, but yes, and he might be right. I've been so focused on helping, on proving I can change, that I haven't really asked what you need, so I'm asking now. Do you want me to leave? Lila was quiet for a long moment, her fingers plucking at the blanket. I don't know. That's honest, at least. I hate that I need you, she said, her voice breaking. I hate that I can't take care of my own son without help. I hate that when I look at you, I see the man who destroyed me and the man who saved my life, and I can't reconcile those two people into something that makes sense. They're both me. The man who was so broken, he hurt everyone who got close, and the man who's trying to be better. I can't erase the first one. I can only try to be the second one more often. But what if you can't? What if this is just temporary, and eventually you go back to being the Victor who throws people away when they become inconvenient? Victor looked at his hands, scarred and rough from a lifetime of violence. Then I'll prove you right, and you'll have been smart to protect yourself. But Lila, I've dismantled my empire, sold my territories, transferred my operations, walked away from 20 years of building power. I can't go back to that life even if I wanted to because it doesn't exist anymore. Her eyes widened. You really did it? Gave it all up? All of it. I kept some legitimate businesses, real estate, investments, things that won't get Alexander's father arrested. But the criminal enterprise? Gone. I made sure of it. Why would you do that? Because I looked at our son and realized I didn't want him visiting me in prison. Didn't want him growing up with a father who might not survive to see his 10th birthday. Didn't want him to inherit a legacy of violence and fear. Victor met her gaze. I want to be someone he can be proud of. Someone you can trust with him. Lila wiped at her eyes, fresh tears streaming down her face. I want to believe you. I want to believe people can change that much, that quickly. But I'm scared, Victor. I'm scared that if I let myself trust you again, you'll break me even worse than before. Then don't trust me yet. Let me earn it. Let me prove through actions, not words, that I'm different. And if I fail, if I prove I can't change, then you'll have been right to protect yourself. And in the meantime? In the meantime, I'll sleep on the futon, help with Alexander, and give you space to heal. No pressure, no expectations, just presence. Lila studied him for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. Okay, but Victor, if you hurt him, if you hurt our son the way you hurt me, I will destroy you. I don't care how powerful you were or how dangerous. I will find a way to destroy you. Victor believed her, saw the steel beneath the exhaustion, the mother bear protecting her cub. It was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. I won't hurt him. That's the one promise I know I can keep. The week of bed rest was harder than the week before. Lila chafed against the restrictions, hating that she couldn't hold Alexander without Victor's help, couldn't change his diapers or give him baths, or do any of the thousand small tasks that mothers were supposed to do. Victor became her hands, following her instructions with patience he'd never known he possessed. He learned the exact way she liked Alexander's bottles prepared, the specific angle at which to hold him during feedings, the songs she hummed when putting him to sleep. He learned that she cried when she thought he couldn't hear her, mourning the loss of the pregnancy experience she'd never get to have again. And he learned that sometimes the best thing he could do was simply be there, a steady presence in the chaos. On the 14th day after the surgery, they had their follow-up appointment with Dr. Reeves. The incision had healed properly this time, the stitches holding strong. Reeves cleared Lila for light activity and told her she could start picking up Alexander again, as long as she took it slow. The relief on Lila's face when she held their son for the first time without assistance was worth every sleepless night, every moment of uncertainty, every fear that he wasn't doing enough. That evening, after Alexander was asleep and Lila was resting in bed, Victor's phone rang. Dmitry Volkov's name appeared on the screen and Victor stepped into the hallway to take the call. "Kane, we have a problem." Victor's stomach dropped. "What kind of problem?" "The Kozlov family. They're not happy about you giving me the West Side territory. They claim it was promised to them in some deal you made 3 years ago, and now they're threatening war if I don't hand it over. Tell them the deal is void. I don't honor agreements from my previous life. That's not how this works, and you know it. The Kozlovs don't care that you've gone soft. They want what they think they're owed, and they're willing to burn down half the city to get it." Victor closed his eyes, feeling the weight of his old life pressing down on him. "What do you want me to do about it?" "Meet with them. Smooth things over. You're the only one they'll listen to." "I can't, Dmitry. I'm out. I told you that. And I'm telling you that your exit is creating a power vacuum that's about to get a lot of people killed, including me, if you care about that." Victor did care, despite everything. Dmitry had been one of his most reliable allies, had saved his life more than once. The thought of him being killed because Victor had walked away made his chest tight with guilt. "When do they want to meet?" "Tomorrow night. Neutral ground. The old warehouse on 5th and Brennan." Every instinct Victor had screamed that this was a trap. That meeting with the Kozlovs was walking into a situation he might not walk out of. But leaving Dmitry to face them alone wasn't an option either. "I'll be there. But Dmitry, this is the last time. After this, I'm done. No more meetings, no more negotiations, no more favors. You need to make that clear to everyone." "Understood. And Kane, bring protection. The Kozlovs aren't known for playing fair." Victor ended the call and stood in the hallway, staring at his phone. He'd thought he was done with this world, thought he'd closed that door permanently. But the past wasn't content to stay buried. It wanted one more piece of him. He went back inside to find Lila sitting up in bed, her expression worried. "Everything okay?" Victor hesitated, weighing honesty against protection. But he'd promised no more lies, no more secrets. "There's a situation. Something from my old life that needs to be resolved. I have to meet with some people tomorrow night." Lila's face went pale. "What kind of meeting?" "The kind where I convince dangerous men not to start a war. It should be straightforward, but it might not be." Lila's voice was tight with fear. "Victor, you said you were done with that world." "I am, but my exit created problems that other people are now dealing with. I need to fix them." "No, you need to stay away. Let them handle their own problems. Lila, if I don't go, people will die. Good people who helped me, who trusted me. I can't just abandon them." "But you can abandon us?" The question was sharp, cutting. "What happens if you go to this meeting and don't come back? What happens to Alexander? To me?" Victor moved to the bed, kneeling beside it so they were eye level. "I will come back, I promise you. Don't make promises you can't keep." Lila was crying now, angry tears streaming down her face. "You don't know what will happen at this meeting. You can't guarantee you'll walk out alive." "No, I can't. But I can prepare, take precautions, make sure I can't do this again." Lila's voice broke completely. "I can't watch you walk into danger and wonder if you're coming back. I already did that for months when we were together, every time you left for business. Every time my phone rang at night, I thought it would be someone calling to tell me you were dead. I can't live like that anymore, Victor. I won't." Victor felt the truth of her words like a physical blow. He'd been so focused on fixing his past mistakes that he hadn't considered he might be creating new ones. "What do you want me to do?" he asked quietly. "I want you to choose, right here, right now. Choose between that life and this one. Between fixing your old problems and building something new, because you can't do both." The choice should have been simple, obvious. Stay with Lila and Alexander. Let Dmitri and the Kozlovs sort out their own mess. Protect the fragile new life he was trying to build. But the memory of Dmitri saving his life in a warehouse ambush 5 years ago wouldn't let Victor take the easy path. The knowledge that his exit had created the problem gnawed at his conscience, and the thought of good people dying because he'd been too cowardly to clean up his own mess made him sick. "I have to go," he said, and watched Lila's face crumble. "But I'm taking every precaution. I'll have protection, an exit strategy, and I'll be in and out as fast as possible. One meeting to end this permanently, and then I'm done. I swear to you, Lila, this is the last time." Lila turned away from him, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "Get out." Lila, cut. "Get out, Victor. Go sleep on your futon. I can't look at you right now." Victor stood slowly, every muscle protesting the movement. "I'm sorry." "You're always sorry. But sorry doesn't keep you alive. Sorry doesn't raise our son when you're dead in an alley somewhere." She pulled the blanket up, creating a barrier between them. "Just go." Victor went, his chest feeling like it was caving in. He lay on the futon, staring at the ceiling, listening to Lila cry, and wondered if he'd just made the choice that would cost him everything. Tomorrow night, he'd walk into a warehouse and face men who wanted him dead. And if he didn't come back, Alexander would grow up without a father, and Lila would have been right to never trust him. The weight of that possibility made it hard to breathe, but backing out now would make Dmitri a target and potentially spark a gang war that could kill dozens of innocent people caught in the crossfire. Victor had created this mess by walking away without properly securing the transition of power. Now he had to fix it, even if fixing it cost him the future he was trying to build. He just hoped the cost wouldn't be his life. Victor didn't sleep. He lay on the futon, watching the shadows move across the ceiling, listening to Alexander's soft breathing from the bassinet and the occasional sound of Lila shifting in bed. Every creak of the building, every distant siren, felt like a countdown to the meeting that could end everything. At 5 a.m, he gave up pretending and sat up. Through the dim pre-dawn light, he could see Lila was awake too, staring at the wall with her back to him. Neither of them spoke. What was left to say that hadn't already been said? Victor made coffee, the ritual giving his hand something to do. He poured 2 cups, added cream and sugar to Lila's the way she liked it, and set it on the nightstand beside her bed. She didn't acknowledge it, but after a moment her hand reached out and pulled the cup closer. Small victories. Alexander woke at 6, hungry and vocal about it. Victor prepared a bottle and lifted the baby from the bassinet, settling into the chair by the window to feed him. The sunrise painted the shabby apartment in shades of gold and pink, transforming it into something almost beautiful. "Hey, little man," Victor whispered, watching Alexander's eyes drift closed as he fed. "Your dad is about to do something incredibly stupid. Your mother knows it's stupid. I know it's stupid. But sometimes you have to be stupid to protect the people you care about." Alexander made a small sound around the bottle, unimpressed by Victor's justifications. "You're right. That's a terrible excuse." Victor adjusted his hold, supporting the baby's head carefully. "The truth is, I made a mess walking away from my old life, and now I have to clean it up. One last time. Then I'm done, I promise. I'll be here for every bottle, every diaper, every moment of your life. I'll teach you to ride a bike and throw a baseball and all the normal father things I never thought I'd get to do." "You're making promises again." Lila's voice was rough from crying. "Promises you might not be able to keep." Victor looked over at her. She'd sat up in bed, her dark hair tangled around her shoulders, her eyes red and swollen. She looked exhausted and beautiful and so achingly vulnerable that Victor's chest hurt. "I know," he said simply, "but I have to believe I'll keep them. The alternative is too terrible to consider." Lila was quiet for a long moment, watching him feed Alexander. "What time is the meeting?" 8 tonight. Neutral ground. Witnesses present. It should be straightforward." "Should be? But might not be. Might not be, Victor agreed, which is why I've made arrangements. If something happens to me, there's a trust fund for Alexander, enough to make sure you never have to worry about money, that he can go to any college he wants, that you're both protected and provided for. I don't want your money, Victor. I want you to not go. I know, but I can't not go, so the money is the best I can offer. Lila climbed out of bed carefully, moving to sit on the futon beside his chair. She was close enough that Victor could smell her shampoo, see the freckles across her nose that he'd once kissed one by one. Tell me honestly, she said quietly. What are the chances you don't come back? Victor had never lied to her about his work, and he wasn't going to start now. 30%, maybe 40%. The Kozlovs are unpredictable, and even with protection, there are too many variables. Lila's breath hitched, but she didn't cry. Those are terrible odds. I've survived worse. That doesn't make me feel better. Victor finished feeding Alexander and lifted the baby to his shoulder for burping. The small weight against his chest felt like an anchor, grounding him to this moment, this life he was risking by going to the meeting. Lila, if I don't come back, don't! Please don't say it. I have to. If I don't come back, I need you to know that these last 2 weeks have been the best of my life. Not the empire I built, not the power I had, but learning to change a diaper and watching you heal and holding our son. That's what mattered. That's what I wish I'd realized 6 months ago. Lila was crying silently now, tears streaming down her face. You can't say things like that and then walk into danger. It's not fair. Nothing about this is fair, but it's necessary. Why? Why is it necessary? Let them fight their war. Let Dmitri handle his own problems. Why does it have to be you? Victor stood, pacing with Alexander against his shoulder. Because I created this situation. I walked away without securing a proper transition of power, and now the vacuum I left is about to get people killed. Good people who trusted me, who helped me, who don't deserve to die because I was too focused on my own redemption to think about the consequences. What about the consequences for us? For Alexander growing up without a father? For me raising him alone, always wondering if you could have made a different choice? The words hit like bullets, each one finding its mark. Victor stopped pacing, looking down at Alexander's sleeping face. His son, the tiny person who deserved a father who made good choices, who put his family first, who didn't walk into warehouses with a 40% chance of not walking back out. You're right, Victor said quietly. You're absolutely right. Going to this meeting is selfish. It's me trying to fix my old mistakes at the expense of my new responsibilities. It's choosing the past over the future. Hope flickered across Lila's face. So you're not going? Victor closed his eyes, the weight of the decision crushing. I don't know. I honestly don't know what the right choice is. The right choice is staying here, with us, alive. And if people die because I stayed, if Dmitri gets killed because I wasn't there to negotiate peace, how do I live with that? The same way you'd expect me to live with you dying in that warehouse. You find a way because the alternative is giving up. Victor opened his eyes, looking at Lila. Really looking at her, seeing not just the woman he'd hurt, but the mother fiercely protecting her child, the survivor who'd rebuilt her life from nothing, the person who'd somehow found the strength to let him back in despite every reason not to. What would you do? He asked. If you were me, what would you choose? Lila stood, moving close enough that Victor could see the gold flecks in her brown eyes. I would choose the people who need me now over the people who needed me then. I would choose my son's future over my past mistakes. I would choose love over loyalty to a world that was never going to love me back. That simple, and that hard. She reached out, touching Alexander's tiny hand where it rested against Victor's shoulder. You've spent 2 weeks proving you can change. Don't throw that away for one last meeting with ghosts. Victor stood there, feeling the weight of 2 lives pressing against him. The one he'd built on violence and fear, and the one he was trying to build on redemption and love. Both demanded his loyalty. Both had legitimate claims on his conscience. But only one had Alexander. Only one had Lila. Only one offered a future instead of just settling accounts with the past. Victor pulled out his phone and dialed Dmitri's number. It rang twice before the arms dealer answered, his voice gruff with sleep. Kane, it's barely 6 in the morning. I'm not coming to the meeting. Silence. Then, are you serious? Completely. I'm out, Dmitri. I told you that. I meant it. The Kozlov situation is your problem now, not mine. You're signing my death warrant. Dmitri's voice was cold, angry. You know that, right? Without you there to negotiate, they'll kill me and take the territory by force. Then give them the territory. Walk away like I did. The West Side isn't worth dying for. Easy for you to say. You got out clean. Some of us are still in the trenches. Then get out. I'll help you set up somewhere new, give you enough money to start over. But I'm not coming to that meeting, and I'm not letting you guilt me into it. This is about the woman, isn't it? About playing house with your baby? Victor's hand tightened on the phone. This is about making a choice between the man I was and the man I want to be. And I choose the future, Dmitri. I choose my son. Another long silence. Then Dmitri laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. You've gone soft, Kane. The Victor I knew wouldn't have blinked at attending a meeting like this. The Victor you knew threw away the best thing that ever happened to him because he was too broken to recognize love when it was standing in front of him. I'm trying very hard not to be that Victor anymore. Well, good luck with that. I hope it works out better than I think it will. Dmitri, don't. Just don't. You made your choice. I'll make mine. But don't call me again, Kane. We're done. The line went dead. Victor stood holding his phone, feeling the finality of that severed connection. Dmitri had been one of his oldest allies, someone he'd trusted with his life more times than he could count. Walking away from that felt like amputating a limb, but keeping it would have cost him everything that mattered. He looked at Lila, who was watching him with wide eyes. I'm not going. Really? Her voice was barely a whisper. Really? You were right. The people who need me now matter more than the people who needed me then. I'm staying here. With you. With Alexander. Where I belong. Lila's face crumpled and she started crying in earnest. Not sad tears this time, but relief so profound it shook her whole body. Victor wrapped his free arm around her, pulling her against his side while cradling Alexander with the other, creating a small circle of 3 people who'd somehow survived the storm. Thank you, Lila sobbed into his chest. Thank you for choosing us. I should have chosen you 6 months ago. I'm sorry it took almost losing you to figure out what mattered. They stood like that for a long time, the morning light growing stronger, painting the apartment in shades of hope. Alexander slept on, unaware that his father had just made the most important decision of his life. Eventually, Lila pulled back, wiping her eyes. What happens now, with Dmitri and the Kozlovs? I don't know. Maybe they find a way to work it out. Maybe they don't. But it's not my problem anymore. My problem is figuring out how to be a good father and earning back your trust. Those are better problems to have. Much better. Victor looked down at Alexander. I should put him back in the bassinet. Let him sleep somewhere more comfortable than my shoulder. Wait. Lila touched Victor's arm. Can I hold him? I haven't really held him since the incision opened. I've been too scared. Victor carefully transferred Alexander to Lila's arms, watching her cradle their son with infinite gentleness. The sight made his chest tight with emotions he didn't have names for. He's perfect, Lila whispered, kissing Alexander's forehead. Despite everything, despite all the chaos and pain and fear, we made something perfect. We did. And I'm going to make sure he grows up safe and loved and never doubting for a second that his father chose him. Lila looked up at Victor, and for the first time since he'd walked back into her life, her smile reached her eyes. That's a good start. The day passed quietly, both of them hyper-aware that 8 o'clock was approaching but choosing not to acknowledge it. Victor made breakfast, cleaned the apartment, did laundry in the building's basement machines. Normal domestic tasks that felt revolutionary for someone who'd spent 20 years having other people handle such things. Lila rested, holding Alexander for long stretches, talking to him in soft tones about the future they were going to build together. Victor listened from across the room, memorizing the sound of her voice, the way she smiled when Alexander grabbed her finger, the gentle strength that had carried her through everything. At 7:30, Victor's phone started ringing. He checked the screen. Dmitri. He let it go to voicemail. It rang again and again. You should answer it. Lila said quietly. What if something's wrong? Victor hesitated, then picked up. Dmitri. Kane, thank God. Listen, the meeting's off. The Kozlov's back down. Victor's eyebrows rose. What? Why? Because I told them you weren't coming, and if they wanted war, they'd have to go through me. Turns out they weren't as eager to fight when they didn't have you as leverage. They took the territory we offered and backed off. That's it? It's resolved. It's resolved. Peacefully, even. Who knew? Dmitri laughed, and this time it sounded genuine. I'm sorry about this morning, Kane. I was angry, scared, and I took it out on you. You were right to choose your family. I appreciate that. And Dmitri? The offer stands. If you want help getting out, setting up somewhere clean, I'll make it happen. I might take you up on that. This life is getting old, and I'm tired of watching my back every second. But Kane, don't disappear completely. Some of us might need advice from someone who successfully got out. I won't. And Dmitri, thank you for understanding. Thank you for teaching me it's possible to walk away. Now go be with your family. And Kane, don't screw it up this time. Victor ended the call and looked at Lila. It's over. The Kozlov's back down. No meeting, no war, no drama. It's actually over. Lila's eyes filled with tears again. Really? Really, I'm done with that world, for good this time. She set Alexander in his bassinet and crossed the room to Victor, stopping just inches away. I'm still angry with you, for what you did 6 months ago, for the pain you caused, for making me doubt myself. I know. You have every right to be. But I also see you trying. I see you changing, and I think... She paused, searching for words. I think maybe I could learn to trust you again. Eventually. If you keep proving you mean it. Victor's heart was hammering so hard he thought it might break through his ribs. I'll prove it every day, for as long as it takes. Good. Because Alexander needs a father, and I... She stopped, biting her lip. I'm not ready to say I love you again. Not yet. But I'm not ready to give up on you either. That's more than I deserve. Probably, but we're not keeping score anymore. She reached up, touching his face with gentle fingers. We're building something new, something better than what we had before. Victor covered her hand with his, turning his head to kiss her palm. Something worth fighting for. Worth changing for, she corrected. Fighting is what got us into this mess. Changing is what gets us out. She was right. She was right about everything. Victor had spent his life fighting, for territory, for respect, for survival. But fighting had only ever brought him emptiness. Changing, on the other hand, had brought him this moment, this woman, this chance at redemption. The weeks that followed were a revelation. Victor had never lived such a simple life, no territories to manage, no enemies to outwit, no power plays to navigate. Just bottles and diapers, and learning which cry meant hungry versus tired versus needing a change. He read all 23 parenting books he'd ordered, took notes, implemented strategies with the same focus he'd once applied to criminal enterprises. Lila healed slowly, her body recovering from the trauma it had endured. Victor was there for every step, every small victory, every setback. When she could finally walk to the corner store without pain, he celebrated like she'd won a marathon. When she managed to bathe Alexander by herself for the first time, he saw the pride in her eyes and felt his own chest swell with matching emotion. He also started looking for a new place to live. The apartment was too small, too unsafe, too temporary for what they were building. He searched quietly at first, not wanting to pressure Lila, but eventually she noticed. "What are you doing?" she asked one evening, finding him scrolling through real estate listings on his phone. "Looking at houses. Nothing specific, just exploring options." "Houses?" Lila moved closer, looking at the screen. "Victor, I can't afford a house." "I know, but I can, and I was thinking, if you were comfortable with it, we could find something together, something safe, with a yard for Alexander to play in when he's older, good schools nearby, room for all of us." Lila was quiet for a long moment. "That sounds like we're a family. Aren't we? Maybe not in the traditional sense, but we're raising a child together. We're building a life together. That feels like family to me." "It does," Lila admitted softly. "But Victor, I need to know this is real. That you're not going to wake up one day and decide you miss the old life, the power, the empire. I don't miss it. Not for a second. Do you know what I did today while you were napping? I changed 4 diapers, sang 12 rounds of a lullaby I found online, and watched a YouTube video on proper baby-wearing techniques so I could carry Alexander while doing dishes. That was my day. And it was better than any day I had building an empire. You watched a video on baby-wearing? Lila's lips twitched. The technique is very specific. I wanted to make sure I was doing it right. Victor pulled up the video on his phone, showing her. See? The hip carry requires proper weight distribution to avoid back strain. Lila started laughing, really laughing, the sound filling the apartment with warmth. You're serious? You actually studied how to carry a baby? Of course I'm serious. This is important. She kissed him then, sudden and impulsive, her lips soft against his. Victor froze, afraid to move, afraid to break the moment. It was their first kiss since he'd walked back into her life, and it tasted like forgiveness and hope, and second chances all at once. When she pulled back, her eyes were bright. Okay. Okay, let's look at houses, together, as a family. They found a place 3 weeks later, a small 2-bedroom in a neighborhood that was safe and quiet, with a backyard big enough for a swing set and good schools within walking distance. It wasn't the mansion on the cliff, but Victor didn't want the mansion anymore. He wanted this, a normal house in a normal neighborhood where he could be a normal father. The day they moved in, Victor carried Alexander through the front door while Lila followed with her small collection of belongings. The house was mostly empty, furnished only with basics Victor had purchased, waiting for Lila to add her touches, her personality, her life to the walls. It's really ours? Lila asked, standing in the living room and turning in a slow circle. It's really ours. All 3 of us. That night, after Alexander was asleep in his new nursery and the boxes were mostly unpacked, Victor and Lila sat on the back porch watching the stars. It was quiet, peaceful, the kind of moment Victor had never imagined he'd have. I have something to tell you, Lila said, her voice nervous. Victor's stomach clenched. Okay? I've been thinking a lot about us, about what we are, what we're building, where this is going. And I think... She paused, taking a breath. I think I'm ready to say it again. I love you, Victor. Not the same way I loved you before, when I was naive and hopeful and didn't really understand what I was getting into. This is different. This is loving you with my eyes open, knowing your flaws, seeing your scars, and choosing you anyway. Victor felt tears prick his eyes, something that hadn't happened since the night Alexander was born. I love you too. I've loved you through every moment of the past 6 months, even when I didn't deserve to. I'll love you for the rest of my life if you'll let me. I'll let you on one condition. Anything. Marry me. Victor blinked, certain he'd heard wrong. What? Marry me. Not because we have a child together, not because it's expected, but because I want to build a life with you, a real life, with a future and promises and the kind of commitment that means something. So Victor Kane, former crime lord and current expert in baby-wearing techniques, will you marry me? Victor started laughing and crying at the same time, pulling Lila into his arms. Yes, absolutely yes, though I'm pretty sure I was supposed to be the one asking. You can ask next time. Next time? When you propose properly, with a ring and a speech and all the traditional things. But for now, I'm asking you. What do you say? I say yes. I say I'll spend every day earning the right to be your husband. I say I'll be the best father I can be to Alexander and any other children we might have. He stopped, remembering what Dr. Reeves had said. I'm sorry. I forgot you can't have more biological children, Lila finished. But there are other ways to build a family. Adoption, fostering. We have options if we want them. And right now, I just want to focus on the family we have. Victor kissed her properly then, pouring every ounce of love and gratitude and hope into it. When they pulled apart, both breathing hard, Lila smiled. We should probably make this official, set a date, plan something small. How about next month, City Hall, just us and Alexander and maybe a few close friends? Perfect. Simple and real, just like everything else we're building. They were married 4 weeks later in a ceremony that lasted 15 minutes and included Alexander crying through the vows. Victor wore a simple suit instead of the designer clothes he'd once favored, and Lila wore a white dress she'd found at a consignment shop. There was no reception, no elaborate celebration, just the three of them going out for ice cream afterward and walking through the park. It was perfect. Victor's transformation became complete in those quiet months of marriage and fatherhood. He enrolled in business courses at the community college, learning to run his legitimate enterprises properly, instead of through fear and coercion. He made friends with other fathers at the park, joined a parent group, learned to navigate the world of playdates and preschool applications. On Alexander's first birthday, they threw a party in their backyard. Lila had invited neighbors and friends from her book club, and Victor had invited some of the fathers he'd met at the park. It was chaotic and loud and filled with laughter, everything Victor's old life had never been. As he watched Alexander dig into his birthday cake with both hands, face covered in frosting, Lila beside him laughing and taking pictures, Victor thought about the night in the hospital when he'd almost lost everything. The storm, the blood, the moment he'd made the choice to be better. Dr. Reeves had been right. Trying wasn't always enough. But sometimes, if you tried hard enough, long enough, with enough dedication and love, it could be. Dmitri called him that evening after the party guests had left and Alexander was asleep. "Happy birthday to the little one," Dmitri said. 1 year old. Hard to believe. "How did you know?" Victor hadn't spoken to Dmitri in months. "I keep tabs. Old habit. But Kane? I called for another reason. I'm getting out, following your lead, selling everything, going legitimate, maybe starting that motorcycle shop I always talked about." "That's great, Dmitri, really. Do you need help?" "Nah, I got it handled. But I wanted to say thank you for showing me it was possible, for proving that men like us can change if we want it badly enough. We're not defined by what we were, only by what we choose to become." Philosophical. Fatherhood's made you soft. Best kind of soft there is. They talked for a few more minutes, making plans to meet for coffee in a few weeks, two former criminals trying to navigate the strange world of normalcy. When Victor hung up, he found Lila standing in the doorway, watching him. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Everything's perfect. Come here." She moved into his arms, and they stood together in their small house, listening to their son breathe through the baby monitor, feeling the weight of the life they'd built from ashes. "I never thanked you," Victor said quietly. "For what?" "For giving me a second chance. For seeing something in me worth saving. For loving me when I didn't deserve it. You earned it. Every day, you earned it. I'll keep earning it. For the rest of our lives." Lila tilted her head back to look at him, her eyes shining with tears and love, and the kind of hope that Victor had once thought was weakness. Now he knew it was the strongest thing in the world. "I know you will. You're not the man who threw me out in the rain anymore. You're the man who gave his blood to save us, the man who changed diapers and researched baby wearing and chose his family over his empire. That's the man I married. That's the man Alexander will grow up knowing as his father. I'll make sure he's proud of that man. He will be. We both will." They stood there as the last light faded from the sky, two people who'd survived a storm and found something beautiful on the other side. Victor thought about the mansion on the cliff, the empire he'd built, the power he'd wielded, and felt no regret for walking away from it. This was his empire now, a small house, a wife who challenged him, a son who needed him. It wasn't built on fear or violence or money. It was built on love, on second chances, on the hard work of becoming better every single day. And unlike the empire he'd left behind, this one would last, because it was built on something that couldn't be bought, stolen, or taken by force. It was built on choice, the choice to change, to love, to show up every day and be the man his family deserved. Victor Kane, former crime lord and current expert in baby-wearing techniques, had finally found what he'd been searching for his entire life. He'd found home.